it is, like I say, it is a confirmable breakthrough toward the genuine rational investigation and proof of life after death.
That is a huge claim. Yeah, so we were talking about mirror gazing, which I guess is appropriate because you told me on the way over here that your new book, that's actually in the type up stage.
Yeah, that's right.
Is about the paranormal.
One chapter of it. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's right.
Okay. But the mirror gazing is really interesting. I did want to bring this up again.
Yeah, okay.
So in your experience, and you did this with students, is that right?
Yeah, well, maybe I should put this into context.
Yeah,
Since I was 18 years old, I've pretty much been immersed in ancient Greek philosophy. I mean, I think that's the most fascinating story of history. And when I was 18, I think it was in the month of October, as I recall, I was reading Herodotus's Histories. And in there, Herodotus talks very matter-of-factly about this guy, a king, who wanted to call up his dead wife, Melissa. So very matter-of-factly, Herodotus says, so he sent a delegation to the oracle of the dead among the Thesprotians on the river Acheron. And they called up Melissa. And so, I'm sitting there, and I had great respect for Herodotus, but I was thinking, oh, he must have had a bad day, right? Because I knew at age 18 that could not be.
Yeah.
But I quickly found from my reading that the oracles of the dead were very important in the history of Western thought. And if everybody used to have to read Aristophanes when I was in college, and Aristophanes specifically made fun of Socrates as calling up the spirits of the dead. And even in the time of Plato, the average person in the street, if you ask them what a philosopher was, they would say that a philosopher is a person who probes into things up in the air and probes into things down under the earth. Both of those had to do with what we would think of today as the afterlife, because the first one, the things up in the air, around, say, 700 so in that period of time, there was a guy in Greece named Hermotimus. He was known all over Greece. Hermotimus. And Hermotimus was known for his extraordinary ability to leave his body at will and go to different locations. And that was what got early philosophers thinking about the difference between the mind and the body. See, that was, even 300 years after he died, Aristotle, I remember, mentions Hermotimus. So this was a very well-known person. The other thing, the things down under the earth, was that the reality is philosophers were associated with these institutions called oracles of the dead. There were 5 main oracles of the dead in the Greek world. And these were places. This was not to do with mediumship as we think of it today. This was people. These were places where they had these facilities. You would go down under the earth because that was psychologically that was appropriate, because in their mind the afterlife realm was down under the earth. Mm-hmm. And these were subterranean environments. They were dormitory rooms and such. And you would stay down there for a month, and in darkness, and with no doubt talking with the psychagogues, who were the people who guided you through this experience, about your dead relative. Then on the last day, you would go down this corridor, and they had a big cauldron down there, and no doubt it was highly polished on the inside and filled with water, and probably a layer of olive oil on the top. This is how they do it still in the Middle East today. This is.
Well, that's a question I was going to ask.
Yeah.
Because the concept of the abode of the dead,
yeah,
like Hades for the Greek, right?
Uh-huh.
From what I've read anyway, the Jewish concept, the Hebrew concept was, it was called Sheol, but it was very similar.
Yeah.
So I wonder if you knew of any Jewish personalities, any Hebrew thinkers that.
Well, it called up the dead.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what's the Woman of Endor is all about. And according to Cambridge University, which is my choice of experts on religious studies, which is the guy who a guy from Cambridge years ago got in touch with me about this, and he was saying that the Christians had this calling up the dead up until, I think he said, the 4th century, and when it was forbidden. It was forbidden for a Christian to believe that a spirit can be seen in a mirror, but up to that point, people did it. And so also in the Bible, he said the Woman of Endor.
Yeah, the Witch of
Called
Endor.
Up the Dead. That's right. And what this place is, it means Fountain of Door. It's a lot of caves and the hill, and springs, and that would be the place where they would do this kind of thing. And so what he said was that it's. In the King James Version, they said the woman had a familiar spirit. But what he was saying was that was not a Hebrew concept at that time. He said that's just it's not true. And he said what that woman had by which she called up the spirit was an OBH, is the word. And he said, as close as they can get to it, he says they think it's a bull roarer. And for
a bull what?
Bull roarer, bull ROARER. When I was a kid, I mean, it's horrible for me to think about this now at age 81. But when I was a kid, everybody played with a bull roarer, and what it was like a thin slat of wood, say about 6 inches long or 6 or 7 inches long, and very thin, and also about maybe an inch wide. And you would put it on a strong cord, and you would swing it around and around and around at a high rate of speed up above your head, and it gives you this which quickly puts you into this extraordinary hypnotic state. And of course, it's a very dangerous thing. I remember you could get them in the toy store when I was a kid, but nowadays, that's a horrible thing to think about.
I'm going to go home and make one.
Well, but you could. But I mean, and some of my students, when I was a psychology professor, we did it. But just to see, and it really is astonishing it puts you into this trance. But what the scholar at Cambridge told me was that they think that the implement that the Woman of Endor used to call up the spirit was a bull roarer. And having experienced that myself, I could easily imagine how it would work.
Why did they think that?
He gave me a reason. I don't remember, but he just said that would be the most plausible interpretation in that context of the word.
Oh, so it was the words in the text that hinted at
OBH. Is the word, and he said the most plausible, he said the King James has a familiar spirit, but his reasoning was that there was no such concept in the Hebrew, but he said the most likely what meaning of it is a bull roarer, and that she used the bull roarer to put whoever it was into a trance where you would be more likely to see your dead relative.
What comes to my mind is, the question that comes to my mind is, did the bull roarer, is that what you call it?
Bull roarer.
Roarer. Okay.
Roarer, right.
It's a hard word to say. Anyway, what comes to my mind is the the mantra of Om, and they say that it's most effective in achieving a trance-like state of consciousness if it's chanted at a certain frequency.
Yeah.
Right? And so I wonder if how specific were the specifications for these things? Like you had to have a certain thickness of wood, or
like you'd just get whatever piece of wood you could find.
Okay.
Really?
Yeah.
And it's amazing none of us got hurt.
Yeah. Walked off a cliff or something.
or got, flung it into somebody's eye or something.
Well, that too, yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, it's fascinating.
I'm going to look up the Hebrew in that text.
And the Australian Aboriginal shamans used them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
And they used them to go over to the spirit world.
They did.
Yeah, and which I could understand after, these experiences, which sound so extraordinary, are part and parcel of the human existence. And all these things that sound so profound are really not that difficult to achieve in reality. It's like in America, we're just so focused on things. But in Porterdale, Georgia, I had nothing to do as a kid except sitting on the front porch and rocking in my rocking chair. Yeah. So to me, it's that nice state of relaxation where, for example, in high school, I discovered that I started keeping a notebook on my bedside table, even when I was in junior high, because I just discovered that I could solve problems in my sleep. Like that if just before I went to sleep, I would think of something, and then the next morning I'd wake up and it'd be all solved in my head. And all through college, I used that. I would, if I had a paper assignment, I'd read the assignment just before I went to sleep, and then I'd wake up and it would just flow out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so these altered states of consciousness, and I've taught psychotherapists for over 30 years the procedure of calling up the spirits of a deceased person, okay, it was as extraordinary as it sounds in 2025. If we went back to 1880 and you ask your great-grandma, have you ever, she would say, oh, yeah, honey, we do that. It was a folk tradition until radio came in.
Why radio?
Because I think I conjecture what happened is, and the reason I know this was that I've studied this in the iconography of postcards, and up to about 1915, a very common theme on postcards was they would have the mirror there and the dark room and the candle, and you would see the person gazing into the mirror, and the spirit would come out of the mirror. So everybody knew about this.
So you went into a 7-Eleven to get a postcard, and it would have something like that on it?
Well, they didn't have 7-Elevens, right? But, yeah, that was, and it was just a popular theme of iconography or advertising cards, which people used to have. And so what I conjecture happened was that when radio came in, instead of just sitting around in the living room and having parlor games like gazing into the mirror, people were sitting around and listening to the radio, and then watching TV. Yeah. But goes back eternally. One of the wildest stories I know is that, all right, what we're talking about here, right, is the worldwide determination. People all over the world from prehistoric times have found out that if you gaze into an optical clear depth, which can be a clear pond with no debris in the water, just you can see it through it to eternity, or you can in a mirror in a darkened room with a light behind you where it's coming up diffusely and you don't see any reflections. It's just like gazing away into eternity. Or you can use it with a black mirror of obsidian, and under those circumstances, if you prepare yourself, it's like to reflect on your lost loved one, and the good memories, and then the hang-ups, what with the unfinished business and so on.
Yeah.
It's been known since remote antiquity that under those circumstances, people will see visions of departed loved ones, and that people have a number of different descriptions of it. Some people say that the apparition appears in the mirror, and that's what they see. Other people say that, the apparition appears in the mirror, but then the apparition steps out of the mirror and comes into the room with you, full color, 3 dimensions. Another group of folks say that just like Alice through the looking glass, their experience is that their consciousness goes through the mirror and they come out onto some other plane kind of, and that's where they meet their deceased relatives.
Yeah.
I should explain to folks that what happened was, after reading that in Herodotus, then years later in the mid-'80s, I read a classical archaeology journal where they had discovered the remnants of the most famous of the oracles of the Oracle of the Dead, the very one that Herodotus had mentioned. And
wait, what year did they find that?
That was in the mid-'80s.
Wow.
The late 70s, but when I read it, it takes time for the journal articles, right? But
so when you say they found it, it was an archaeological find?
Yeah,
the actual location?
And the archaeologist who found it said all he did was he just went to the place that Herodotus said.
There's an idea.
And there it is. and what they found in there was this cauldron. And the moment I saw that, I knew what it was, because I knew that I did it all the time in my psychology classes, because this is a great way to get kids to realize about their unconscious mind. Because I'd put up a mirror and I'd gaze there. All right, and they would see visions, and was that something you were making up? No, it happened without my intention, right? And so as soon as I saw that, I said, well, that's what they were doing. By the way, some years later, I went to Professor Dockeris, who was the discoverer, and I told him my alternate take on it. And I saw the aha experience, like the moment, like, why didn't I think of that, right? And he went to show me some of the books on his bookshelf that showed that various thing. He said he just never put 2 and 2 together.
Okay.
But anyway, I set it up, and my graduate students of psychology, basically I would say, just choose one person who's died that you want to see again. And then they would come to my house one at a time. You got to take time with this. This is, a process. But, all the students, by the way, the first 10 or 12 students who came, everybody had an experience. But the difference was that they had already had some experience with the mirror gazing, right? In other words, they knew they could do that. So that wasn't new to them. The new part was preparing to use that to see the vision of the deceased. When people come to me, from out of state, they don't want to go through the preliminary, right? So in that circumstance, it's about half to 60%. But it's variable. I've done them in Mexico. They had 30 psychotherapists from all over Mexico. They took a resort center, and they had these rooms where the mirrors were set up, and everybody got to both facilitate somebody else and to be guided through it themselves. And every person had an experience. The same thing in Italy, I did it. I did it in Hamburg, Germany for psychotherapists. Not a single person had an experience.
Interesting.
Yeah. And it's mañana is the difference, right? And you know, I mean, I'm from Porterdale, Georgia. I understand mañana very well.
What do you mean by mañana?
Mañana means just that's what the Mexicans say is mañana. It means tomorrow. It's like, you know, when you call up the plumber in Porterdale, he says, "I'll be there tomorrow." Right? Mañana. And so, but I just think it's so interesting, the cultural differences, because the siesta in Mexico and Italy, people they know about relaxing.
Mm-hmm.
But the remarkable thing about it, I was anticipating, Brett, that it would be about 1 out of 10, you know, who would have it. But every one of the students, but also it never occurred to me that it would be interpreted as a real event. See, and these were sophisticated people. It was first my graduate students of psychology, but as word spread, my medical colleagues, a psychiatrist, a sociology professor, they wanted to do, and these were sophisticated folks.
Mm-hmm.
And to my astonishment, people interpret it to be a real event.
Which you were not expecting.
I was not expecting
it.
And, you know, and with the certitude that, I saw my mother. Wow.
So
about 30% of them hear the audible voice. Almost all the rest of them, they say it's a mind-to-mind or heart-to-heart communication. I mean, you don't really hear, but you have the mind-to-mind.
Yeah, you have a mental impression of some kind of communication. I talked to you the other day. As you know, my dad died a week ago, last Tuesday. So how many days is that? And when I talked to you, I was actually eager to talk to you because of all the things that you've researched. I had an experience. And that experience was that 4 days before Dad died, he was in hospice. He was not responsive. I was meditating, before falling asleep, and slipped into that trance state, and you start to see dream images and whatnot. And then all of a sudden, Dad was there. Not in an image so much, but just an obvious presence of Dad, and kind of startled me. And I said, "Oh, did your body die?" And he said, "No, not yet," in kind of a complaining tone, He said, "But how long am I expected to deal with this brain?" He was very demented, toward the end there. And he said, I said, "Well, why does it feel like I feel when I'm praying to the Lord, And he said, "Well, I'm not the Lord, kind of like, don't be silly, He said, "But I did have to get special permission to do this. I couldn't do it on my own," he said. "But I just, I got the permission, and here I am." And I said, "Okay, but your body's not gone." He said, "No, I got like a string of me going back to it, so I'm there just a little bit, He said, "But I asked for this because I know that I'm okay, but I want you to feel that I'm okay, right?" And that helped me a great deal. And when I called you, I told you about Dad, and I told you about that experience. And I said, the obvious, the most likely reason for all this is my imagination, kind of self-soothing over my, in my grief and loss. And you said something interesting. You said, "Yeah, but what is your imagination?"
Yeah, I mean, I give up on that one, Brett.
Okay.
I mean,
so kind of explain, what you mean by that.
Well, I mean, the one that comes to my mind, just because it was the one I was talking with you about a while ago, but in 1981 or 82 in Charlottesville, Virginia, I was sitting on my back porch in my porch swing, and it was the spring. And I had at that time 2 wonderful sons who were 9 and 11. And my wife had had difficulty with the last pregnancy, so it wasn't wise for us to have another child. And I had always wanted a daughter, okay? And so that night, I have no idea where it came from, but from deep within, the thought came, wouldn't it be wonderful to adopt a Native American daughter? And I really dwelled on it that night. I mean, I didn't send it up as a prayer, I mean, at least that I know of. I mean, who knows what God takes as a prayer, I guess. But, I did not think of it as a prayer. I was just like a deep daydream. I mean, just very heartfelt. But then I just let it go because, I found out later that it's illegal, for some reason. The natives don't want white people to take their children. I can't figure that out myself. Just kidding. And but that wasn't in context of wanting. That was, like I said, I had that deep thought that night, and then I just let it go. Now, that was 1982 or 81 in the spring, let's say. Fast forward, in the year 2000, I was living in Las Vegas where I was teaching in the Consciousness Studies Department. And my wife and I had adopted a son, Carter, who is Mexican-American. We adopted him from Texas. And we adopted him at the moment of birth, right? Mm-hmm. And he still lives, he's still 27 and still at home. Thank you, dear God. Highlight of my life.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah.
And so, by the way, backdating this, in 1996, my wife and I were in New Mexico, and I was giving a lecture. And the previous lecture was up on the podium, and I was getting ready for my lecture. And it was one of these places where to ask your question, you have to go up to a middle aisle, and there's a microphone there, right? And so I was sitting near the front, and my wife sitting to my left, Cheryl. And so the guy on the podium was finishing up, and he was asking for people to come up for questions, right? Well, it happened. My wife punched me and right next to me, to my right, was sitting a Native American woman. And she was obviously, wanting to ask. You could tell from her body language, she wanted so much to ask a question. Well, Native Americans, the culture is not exactly like, let's spring up to the microphone in front of, that's a different world. Mm-hmm. When I went there to lecture on the Blackfeet Reservation, nobody was looking at me. I was just lecturing. And if people were looking down, and I didn't know what. And then I accidentally used, this was a lecture on grief, and I accidentally used the word normal, which is, I don't like that word. And then I corrected myself. I said, normal is somebody, I think that normal is somebody you don't know very well. And all of a sudden, everybody, and, as soon as that make that connection, you're in. It's right. But but Christine was her name, and we met her at this lecture. Mm-hmm. So in the year 2000, 4 years later, out of nowhere, she calls me up and, how are you doing? How are you doing? She said. And I said, we're doing great. We adopted a baby. And she said, I wish so much I had known you were looking, because I work in the hospital on the reservation, and I am the first person to know when we need adoptive parents. So I said, by all means, and a couple of months later, your daughter is on her way. So that's how, and it was that imagination, or what was it?
Yeah, so that's along the lines of manifesting something in our physical reality by imagining it, right? But in this case, it was, the idea was, well, I'm grieving my dad's passing.
That's right.
And he wasn't really conscious at this point.
But it didn't seem like a dream, you said.
No, it seemed like, it was, more typical of a meditation session, and you feel like you're talking to the
Brett,
Lord. But
I've given up on this stuff. I mean, I give up. There is an afterlife, and it still sounds very counterintuitive to me, because I wasn't raised in all this stuff. I lived in Porterdale, Georgia. We never went to church. We were afraid of snakes, but I just didn't have the church thing, and so it's so counterintuitive. But I give up. I have always been a skeptic, which, as you and I know, that word is so misused by people who call themselves skeptics these days, have no idea what the word means. But the Pyrrho, Pyrrho, was the Greek philosopher who founded the skeptical movement. And what it means is it's the spiritual and intellectual practice of refraining from drawing a conclusion in order to expand your mind, number one, and also in order that if everybody else is heading toward the conclusion, but your technique is to look away from the conclusion, then you see things along the side pathways that everybody else had missed. And that's why I'm a skeptic. And so my policy is I don't draw conclusions. But where I am on it, I realize why you can't draw a conclusion, but I just give up. I can't figure my way out of it. The whole thing about the oxygen deprivation to the brain, that's baloney, because the identical same experience, as we call a near-death experience, occurs not just to people who almost die and get resuscitated, but also very commonly to people who are there at the bedside of somebody else who does die.
Yeah.
And the bystanders may say that as Grandma died, I got out of my body and went part way toward the light with her, or people may say that they see the apparitions of the dying person's deceased relatives and friends come into the room as though to escort them away, or they see the room filled with light. And I have plenty of cases of people who empathically co-lived the dying life review of the person they were with, including in one case a medical doctor who was called to the ER to resuscitate a patient he had never laid eyes on. And he said as this guy was dying, the guy's life sprang up.
So he saw the guy's life review.
Yeah, somebody had ever known.
Yeah.
He'd never known. And so, I give up. I can't figure my way out of it.
We hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Please subscribe to our channel. Leave a comment below. We love to engage with you guys on your comments. Thanks for joining us.
So have you ever heard of somebody having a shared death experience, which I assume you're thinking my experience was akin to?
Yeah,
anyway. Yeah. An empathic shared experience. Mm-hmm. What was the question I was going to ask you out of that, though? Have you ever had anybody who said that they had this empathic experience, but the person hadn't died yet? That's what I was going to ask you. So in Dad's case, he wasn't dead. His body was still there.
Well, and what happens at this time is that time dissolves. It's like this woman in Italy called me recently with this extraordinary. She has some advanced degree in something and is I think, a well-known artist, but she had this astonishing shared death experience with her. I guess it was her husband, or her fiance, and which time kind of dissolved. And I had this experience with Dr. George Ritchie, who was the first living person I ever knew who had a near-death experience. And George, this is a long story to tell, but George could walk in time. I know he could, because he came with great urgency. George was like a Southern gentleman. And with great urgency one day, he called me out of nowhere. "Ray, can I stop by your house just a minute?" He didn't even sit down. He just, very urgent. And he said, "And Ray," he said, "this experience causes your humanity to be even more of a burden in a way." And that's what he said. What? And I was scratching my head. I'm not going to go into the details, Brett, but about 5 years later, I know what he came for, but it was something I did, which he, without knowing I did it, passed a harsh judgment on. And the moment I made that realization that he had come back to correct that before it happened. I know it happened. And it sounds so strange, but everybody in Charlottesville kind of who knew George got accustomed to this. Like this man, the best internal medicine doctor in Charlottesville was talking, and he was a good friend of George too, and he was talking one night telling me about how some years before there were two people, a man and a woman, who did not know each other. But George and the internist both knew both of these people. So the internist told me that one night out of nowhere, George said, "Well, those two are meant for each other, and they're going to fall in love and get married." And it happened.
That was before they even knew each other.
Yeah, before they even met.
Yeah.
And I give up.
It is a common thread throughout near-death experiences that the sense of time kind of
dissolves.
Yeah, it's gone.
Yeah.
So I guess what you're saying there in Dad's case, it would be that, well, look,
Yeah.
So some would even say that I am there.
Yeah.
And I am here.
Yeah.
Trying to wrap your head around that is hard, but
it is, and it isn't. It's like it eventually gets to the point where it becomes common sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's, see, I got an early dose of this because I was a philosophy major. And I guess I was kind of a philosophy major even before I went to college, and I was always just fascinated by those imponderables. And so it was always obvious to me when I was a kid that you can't be sure that there's an external physical world, because all you are making inferences that you can't really. I mean, most people say, for example, I have a Coke bottle or a can on my desk, right? And I saw it this morning, and I'm quite sure that, assuming I get back today, I'll see it again, right? But many people from that kind of thing make the inference that the Coke bottle is therefore out there in reality, and I've never been able to make that inference. It's like the great philosopher George Berkeley, the idealism, and you can't really know. And where I have come to this is that, I really think that this thing we're in is like God's movies. God has the movies now to the perfection that when you go to the regular movies, when the character drops a brick on their toe on screen, well, you may wince, but you don't feel the pain, right?
Yeah.
But now this movie we're in, well, when the brick drops on your toe, ouch, right?
Do you think God feels the brick?
It's immersive.
You think that God feels the brick?
I don't know. God, I'm not sure about how much writing the screenplay God does, but I do feel from my life that there's some involvement. I do, but also it's like things that you come up with play out.
Well, I'm thinking of something that Richard Rohr, to my knowledge, introduced, and it's the concept that God is not only the all-powerful one, he is also the all-vulnerable one. In that, being the singularity from which reality springs, he is experiencing everything that we're experiencing.
That's what I've come to think, that everything is that what I'm experiencing right now is part of God. It sounds so egomaniacal is the trouble.
Except that if it's true of everyone, then
that's right, exactly. And and it's and also I've definitely seen the sense of humor is very conspicuous to me. I had this experience
I'd have to
years
agree
ago.
with you.
And it's like I treated somebody very badly for quite a period of time because I felt like I had been, wronged, and so I just treated this person very badly for quite a period of time. Now, flash forward years later, I found myself in the same situation, except now that I am the victim, right? And not only that, this is really quite literal. The person was about 10 times as good at it as I had been.
At treating you badly?
Yes. And I realized immediately what it was about. Like, that was to get your attention.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And the whole time through this ordeal, I kept saying, thank you, God, thank you, God, thank you, God, thank you, God.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's education. It's not punishment.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting, when you look in the, at least from your experience with a lot of Christians in America anyway, that they believe in, retributive punishment on God's part, not only retributive, but eternal.
Yeah.
Eternal conscious torment for
That's right.
The creatures that he made and that he would, by default, have foreknown would spend eternity in conscious torment.
Yeah.
It just falls apart philosophically for me. But a lot of people do believe this, and they take this from their interpretation of the scriptures, right?
Yeah.
But the word that is used, for example, in Matthew chapter 25, where you have the parable of the sheep and goats at the judgment.
Yeah.
These on my right will go into eternal punishment, is the way it reads in English. These on my right will go into eternal life. These on my left to eternal punishment. The word that's used, the Greek word that's used, is the there are two words you could use for punishment or translate to punishment. One would be timoria, which is retributive, and the other one is colossus, which has its roots in an agricultural word, as I understand it, for pruning. And so colossus is more correctly translated as correction.
Yeah, cool.
Like a father would correct his child. So it makes no sense then to say that that the word aionios, which is usually translated in English as eternal, should be translated eternal. What good would it be to just eternally correct someone?
Yeah. I just gotta say that there is something about this which is so fascinating in the history of it. Because if you look at the early iconography of hell, in the early church, the hell was conceived of as entertainment for the elect. And you can see it in the iconography. And Tertullian specifically talks about it. They called it the abominable fantasy. That part of the bliss of the elect in heaven would be that they could watch the torments of the people burned in hell down below. And you can see and they're up there, they're laughing and joy. And Tertullian writes about it. He said, "What an abundance of joy on that day," he says. And he's,
good Lord.
What spectacle shall I turn to first to laugh? And it's still that way. It's like, for some reason, there's a certain kind of person who just loves the mental experience of watching their people who disagree with their ideology burning in hell. And I mean, that's the reality, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, though. You're right. Mm-hmm. And I like to point out, at risk of sounding like a xenophobe, that Tertullian was a Latin father, not a Greek father.
That's right.
And so his understanding of, all the language there would not be the same as the Greek fathers. And that the Greek fathers did not, for, at least the lion's share of them, they didn't believe in an eternal damnation. Mm-hmm. They didn't believe in an eternal conscious torment. No. They believed that there was something but the nature of it was corrective and restorative. Not retributive. So a lot of people don't know that. A lot of Christians don't know that, and they still buy into these kind of, I think, destructive ideas,
Something, I've just talked to God every day, and he's never said a word to me about religion or anything. Yeah. It's like, but the Christ thing, I got to say, what I say is that I am not a Christian. And what I say is that I am a follower of Christ.
That's what we say here.
Yeah. See, because I had a personal experience with Christ. This is nothing about, you're going to burn in hell. This is a totally different thing. So, but I think that in the way that many people use that word Christian is as an in-group word.
Yeah.
It's to say that I am a Christian, meaning I am with these folks over here,
right.
See? And you are not a Christian. Even though the person, they can get into where they're, I'm a Christian. No, I'm not. Yes, no, you aren't. Yes, I am. And, it's just and it
becomes a tribal label instead of what it was originally meant to be.
Jesus is great, but Jesus is, that's a different thing.
Just like God is great, but God.
Yeah. But I'm all for Christ, and I'm just not. I have no idea what the connection is. Maybe they will, or maybe they won't tell me about that when I go over there.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't really matter much.
Who was the guy that he was the chief anesthesiologist? Out in California somewhere at a medical facility that worked on difficult cardiac cases. And you actually wrote the foreword.
Rajesh.
Yeah.
Raj.
He was a Hindu.
Yeah.
But he said it was Jesus.
Yeah, I've had even in Augusta, Georgia, in about 1973, I talked with a Muslim man who had, in his near-death experience, he saw Jesus, which is not so surprising because, Jesus is also a figure in their religion.
Very important figure.
And also, as I much later learned, that it's, seeing Muhammad is not a good idea.
Yeah.
Because you're not supposed to see an image or something, they said.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but he saw Jesus. Yeah. That is a thing because, they want to maintain God's glory for what it is, and it's not something you can see.
Don't tell him you saw me. All right, Muhammad, I won't. Just tell him you saw Jesus. That's all right with him.
Maybe that's what happened.
Now,
so
when you go back, don't tell him you saw Muhammad.
Yeah,
it's going to make them upset.
Yeah.
But if you say Jesus, they'll say, all right.
In fact, all the Christians in America will love you. And they'll say, see, I told you. So going back to my story about Dad, so this idea that God is the singularity from which reality springs, right? Then my imagination is all part of that too. Mm-hmm. So who cares if it's my imagination?
That's right. Didn't Einstein say that imagination is more important than whatever he said?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's true. Okay, so
it is just so bizarre what happens.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
I played I've never been into games, but in my college dormitory in 1963, my first year of college, and it was in the wintertime, we were playing this game, and they just, something, it's like and they learned in psychology or something, it's about like see a woman or something, and I saw this image of a blonde woman from behind. I saw her dress, I saw her hair. And then in September of 1992, in St. Petersburg, she walked into the television studio where she was interviewing me on the TV. And a year later, we got married. We've been married 32 years, and we got 2 kids. I mean, what is that?
Yeah.
Really?
That's the weird serendipitous things that everybody experiences to some degree.
Yeah.
So I wanted to go back to the kind of the paranormal stuff, because you're as I mentioned, you're writing, or you've just finished a book.
Yeah.
That's not yet published. But what is you said there's a chapter on the paranormal.
Yes. Well, this is what it is. And I'm hoping that, I can't wait to get this thing typed up and distributed, because I got an argument here that I think is telling. And that is, and it's really hard in this brief period of time to lay it out where it sounds, where you can see it. But basically what it is that there are 5 patterns of 12 separate fact patterns. I use that phrase. I was a forensic psychiatrist, and prosecutors use that phrase, fact patterns. And the reason is this, as explained to me, is like when you have a bunch of human beings who got to be witnesses in a trial, everybody's going to have some memory differences, right? Mm-hmm. So how you fix that is that you look for what they call the fact patterns.
Okay.
Right, which is the way the facts are lining up. And it works wonders. And so what I contend is, and we can put this out in the ether, and then we can, in a future time, let's make this prediction right now, that I think that I can show you by 12 patterns of easily established facts that the paranormal is a species of recreation, entertainment, and play, which has an intrinsically spiritual axis to it. And that sounds so completely, and so let's stop it with that. That sounds so completely counterintuitive and shocking, right?
Yes.
What I'm going to say is that the next time we're on this program, that everybody here will say, yeah, it's true. All right? And there's three folks in addition to me in this room. So I predict that in whatever time we establish to do this, that all three of you will agree with that fact.
Yeah. Okay, so repeat it again. That the
paranormal. What is it? All right. The paranormal is a species of recreation, entertainment, and play, which has an intrinsically spiritual connection to it.
Okay, and so this is established
by argumentation.
Okay, so the 12 fact patterns.
Yep.
What would be an example of a?
Well, one fact pattern would be that, all right, the common law, all right? The common law is the accumulation of people that the societies for a couple of thousand years have put up as the wisest people in the society, right?
Okay.
And the common law is the collective wisdom of those people to, and often terribly horrible things to try to figure out, like, well, it's Aunt Ma's egg, but, it's Uncle Hamper's sperm, but then Aunt Jenny was the surrogate, so, and now they had a falling out. Well, whose baby is it? Well, I don't know, but somebody's got to figure it out. Well, what has the law determined that the paranormal is? And why would the law be interested is, well, you have to have a business license, right? I have to have my business life to bag downtown. I do. I mean, it's terrible, but I just made that up. But you have to have a business license. So when a psychic or a medium goes down to the city hall to get their business license, what has the law in its practical wisdom decided to classify them as? Is recreation workers.
Oh.
That's one of 12 fact patterns. And so what I'm making the prediction here and now is that in a couple of weeks or whenever we get together again, all three of you guys will say, yeah, it sounds counterintuitive, but Raymond Moody is right.
All right.
Great.
Let's find out.
Yeah. And then I can sell you my miraculous. I got an ego. I've got a aura grinder for sale. An aura grinder. It's like you point it to somebody that you don't like, and it grinds up their aura. It's only $39.95.
So, all right. So then, what is the overall gist of the book?
The book, which is called Swan Song, the chapter on the paranormal is one of 9 chapters.
Okay.
But and I am saying this now to not to announce an ideology, but to try to get people to refute me. But what I say, Brett, is that I have made a genuine, verifiable breakthrough and toward rational proof of life after death. And one of the criterion of it has to be that the question of an afterlife is so monumental that anything that makes that kind of assertion has to be such that anybody who works through it should see it for themselves. And that's what I'm claiming, is that there is a path of reasoning that we can go through that opens up an entirely new way of thinking about the question of life after death.
Okay.
Yep.
I can't wait to read it.
Right.
So then, can you summarize what that line of reasoning is?
Yes. Well, basically, folks, the people today who claim that they are scientific experts on the afterlife, I'm sorry, that is all bunk. And these are my dear, dear friends. That, some of the nicest people I've ever known in my life are parapsychologists. And I'm not talking behind their back. This is how I talk to their face, too. But that's just pseudoscience. In 2025, the question of life after death is not yet a scientific question. That's the reality. And the people who say so, who say otherwise, that the question is scientific, are called parapsychologists. And let me explain to you, first of all, where rational inquiry into life after death got started. The first person to attempt a rational proof of life after death was Alcmaeon, 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 who was a contemporary of Pythagoras. And Alcmaeon laid down a fundamental principle of logic that's built right into it in the beginning. And this was Alcmaeon's observation. He realized, oh my goodness, things that touch on human life come in opposite pairs. Hot, cold, up, down, right, left, life, death, odd, even, love, hate. And that in 600 BC, or 580 BC, was big news. I mean, holy mackerel. Because now people could write things down, and that, he's right, So then which table of opposites is best and all, but then my point was that as soon as he made this observation, it's still in logic now in the true-false distinction, right? But the polarity is still in logic. But the person who laid that down into our logic immediately went on to formulate a proof of the immortality of the soul. So, right there at the forefront of his mind, a founder of logic, was this question of an afterlife. So this was his argument. First of all, and what the Greeks of that time, what was immortal? It was the gods, and the heavenly bodies were gods, and they went around in the cycle every day, and by definition they were immortal, right? That's what it means to be a god, is to be immortal. And so what Alcmaeon said was that the gods, who are immortal, move in a circular motion, but that the soul itself moves in a circular motion on the same cycle, night, day, sleep, wake, right? And so, since the soul moves in the circular motion, the same one the gods do, and the gods are immortal, therefore. And now you think about, at the very beginning, this was long before Aristotle's logic, at the very inception of rational thinking, one of the first things he wants to do is prove the immortality of the soul. And so what happens is that you can't really comprehend the question of an afterlife unless you understand where the Greeks started with it, because the Greeks formulated the logic that you and I are using right now, right?
Yeah.
And when you go back and think about how they did it, the main question they were asking was, is there life after death? So the logic that we have has been shaped by its encounter with that very question.
Yeah.
Right? Now, that is where my kind of inquiry into life after death comes from. Where parapsychology begins is in 1848 in upstate New York with two little girls cracking their toes underneath a blanket. Because, it must have been pretty lonely out there in upstate New York in 1848 and not much to do for a couple of mischievous girls. So pretty soon the parents hear, "Craig, you hear that popping?" "I don't know." Well, then pretty soon people coming from all around, and they hear it too. But then somebody says, how about one pop for yes, two pops for no? All right, then pretty soon, oh, it's a dead spirit. He died in this house. That was the origin of spiritualism, Brett.
Is it really?
That's where all of the mediums and everything came from.
From two kids cracking their toes.
This is chapter 3 of my book. So, and that's the reality. Now, how did parapsychology come out of this? Then these folks get interested in, by then scientism reigns everything. It's got to be scientific. So we got to have scientific. That's how the psychical researchers and the parapsychologists got started as a reaction to those two girls. Years later, they went on stage and they explained how they did it. I got a niece who's just amazing, and she can tell you what the sound of one hand clapping is. She does her hand like this, and you pop, pop, pop. And she's this amazing kid. It's pretty amazing. She got a 4.0 in college on being a philosophy major and an international finance, I think it was, major. 4.0.
Not bad.
Yeah.
So what would be your answer to typical criticisms of near-death experiences?
Okay, yeah.
So for example, Michael Shermer, who is, kind of famous...
Michael is...
skeptical mind. He says that NDEs reflect wishful thinking, fear of death, and cultural imagination. Beliefs in heaven and hell are psychologically comforting, not scientifically supported.
Yeah. Well, I talked to Michael just not long ago about that, and I was telling him, I said, "Michael, not everybody wants there to be a life after death." And he said, "Good point." And so this is what I'm going to say. And by the way, he's a neat guy. I just really like him. And so I'm going to make the same challenge to Michael. I already talked to him about it. I'm going to send him my manuscript and see what he thinks. But what I would say is, let's make this more general, that to the specific point is, why is this not a hallucination caused by the brain damage, is because the bystanders who are not ill or injured at the scene of somebody die will have all of those experiences, including leaving their body. People say that as Grandma died, I left my body with her, and I went up and I went part way. I saw her relatives, then I came back and joined my body. Or they say the room filled with light, or that they saw apparitions of the deceased, of the deceased loved ones of the dying person. And like I said, I've had cases where the bystander empathically co-lived the dying life review of the person who was passing away, including a medical doctor who had never even met the guy he was resuscitating. So,
was the guy resuscitated? Was that patient resuscitated?
No, he died. But the guy, the doctor said that the guy was dying, but as the doctor said he saw everything the guy had ever done.
Yeah, it would just be interesting if he did. If he was revived, then he could verify. Yeah.
Yeah, but and also, like, the place where I really kind of gave up was, I have a friend, Jeff Olson, and Jeff is a fine arts type. It's like always the clothes look like out of the fashion magazine, every hair in place. He owns a advertising firm, and Jeff was in this horrific accident, and his leg was smashed off, and one of his children died, and his wife died, and in the accident. God. And so I have this other guy I know, who's Jeff O'Driscoll, and Jeff is a well-known emergency room doctor. And so when Jeff Olson was brought into the hospital and, surrounded by tubes and all, Jeff Olson had a near-death experience. But when Jeff O'Driscoll, the ER doctor, went into the room where he was surrounded by all the wires and tubes and all, Jeff O'Driscoll had an extended conversation with Jeff Olson's dead wife. And I know a number of cases like that. I give up. I just give up. I can't think my way out of it. So that's why but more than that, see, it's like, just because Raymond Moody has given up, that doesn't say anything about anybody else. What I'm saying is that I now have worked out a logical process to go through whereby you can see how it can be proved. And that's what I want to say. Let's make this challenge. I'm going to say that by the next time we get together, then my book you can all read the book. And maybe we can get a couple other people too who might do this. Yeah. And have a panel. Then I'm making the claim that this is a genuine advance toward the rational inquiry into life after death, which opens a way for a genuine proof of life after death. Mm-hmm. And so that's my challenge, and I'm asking y'all to help me find errors of fact or reasoning.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we'll have to give it to Dr. Troy and give it to Kevin O'Hara. So, Raymond, it goes without saying, I am so grateful that you're willing to do this. It's not only an honor, it's just fun.
It is. That's right.
I never know. I told people, I never know when I call Raymond what kind of personality I'm going to get on the other end of the phone.
Well,
I think this morning it was I
have a home
Chinese
there,
takeout.
Like some of my folks answer sometimes.
Anyway, so thanks for doing this with us.
Hey, I'm just always love to do it, Brad, and thanks again. So everybody, thank you.